You don't hear the word joy thrown around a lot in business, and that's why I'm delighted to share this conversation with you with Simi Rayat, who is the author of the upcoming book Productivity Joy. And her thing is like, are you a joy to be around? Like at work, at home, on the streets. And it's such a great question. It reminds me of my friend Howard Prager's trademark question, how can I make someone's day? It's just this little sort of mantra that allows you to orient your whole life towards a really beautiful goal. And for Simi, it's about being a source of joy for others, being someone that other people actually want to be around. And if you think about it, like what a powerful focus for the workplace, for our volunteer organizations, for our families, for anywhere that we want to have a positive change, because there's so much wrong with the world and there's so much to be angry about and there's so much to be sad about. And if we want to mobilize people to action, to make a difference, to make a change, we can't just run on the fuel of negativity. We also need joy. And the harder it is to generate that joy, the more I would say it's needed. So I'm really excited to share this conversation. We talk about Simi's like 5 power minutes in the morning, a sort of evidence-based practice to help you focus and take responsibility for yourself and for your emotions and your words and actions. It's chock full of science, it's chock full of joy, and I hope it helps you bring about the world that you want to see. So without further ado, Simi Rayat, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you, Howie. So looking forward to having the conversation with you.
Yeah, let's jump right in. You are a business psychologist. Is that a good way to describe you?
Yeah, it's a great way to describe me. I've been working as a business psychologist for the last 20 years now. Started in the UK and now here based in Melbourne, Australia, but working with clients globally.
Gotcha. So when I imagine a business psychiatrist, I have this image of Mr. Peanut sitting on a couch, and you're asking about his mother or something. Obviously, that's not right. What does a business psychologist do?
Yeah, so look, as a business psychologist, I'm really helping and working with leaders and business owners get out of their own way. So what do I mean by that? I mean, quite often as a leader, you may not be aware of the bright side and the dark side of your personality. We all have both sides. And it's quite interesting when we're under stress and pressure and the spotlight is on us. The dark side of the personality and our leadership traits can really come out. And those behaviors could look like micromanaging, being really unclear about what you want, just being quite reactive to people and the situation. So my role is to really help leaders become deeply self-aware and be able to manage their behaviors and their responses in a way that helps to inspire confidence in those that they lead. But also, Howie, I think the main thing is to help them be a joy to work for and do business with.
Well, I want to come back to that because that's a very evocative word. I'm curious when you mention things like micromanaging, is the dark side of the personality the same as the bright side, but just coming out in a different way? So like the person who micromanages under stress, like when their bright side is showing, they're conscientious or on top of things or supportive?
Yeah.
Like are they the same thing but opposite sides of the coin?
They can be, but at their extreme, the dark sides are our strengths when they're overplayed. So, as you say, someone who is really charming and has a lot of gravitas, is able to win the hearts and minds of others. When that's overplayed, that can also tip over to manipulative behaviors to really get what you want. And perhaps those behaviors can persuade others to do things that they may not want to do or wish to do. So, being really aware of the dark side and how that comes across is so important, because during times of high stress and pressure, without realizing it, quite often, the dark side can take over.
Mm.
It's when we actually let our guard down, when we're not really managing our behavior and we're not very conscious and intentional about our impact on others. That's when the dark side can really show up.
Hmm. That, I mean, part of me feels like sad hearing that. Like we have to be, managing ourselves. Like, like I think about like, babysitting a 4-year-old, right? Like if I, get distracted for a minute, they've just, given haircuts to all the paintbrushes or something, right? Like, so do you see us as like if we're not self-monitoring, we're likely to be out of control?
I don't think it's that we're going to be out of control if we're not self monitoring, but if we are wanting to have a significant positive impact on those around us, if we're wanting to be the best versions of ourselves so we can inspire the best versions of others as well, we can do that so much more impactfully when we are self-regulating.
Hmm.
And there's so many things that go on in our mind, the thoughts that we have, our unconscious mind at play. There's so many heuristics, we call them in psychology, like shortcuts that your brain takes. And our brains are essentially a little bit lazy, actually. We'll fall into those traps and those patterns without even realizing it. And I think as leaders today, in this world today, as many of us are working in diverse organizations with people from very diverse backgrounds, different cognitive diversity all around us, it's so important that we are really aware of how we're showing up, how we are interacting, because we can then regulate, moderate, and if needed, change and tweak that behavior so we can have a stronger impact, an impact that's really going to help um, benefit those around us.
Hmm. So it's kind of a little bit of the opposite of what I think of as flow,
Mm.
right? Right. So there's like we can get into flow in a work, in a task, but in general, um, awareness of our impact on others is a kind of a metacognition, right? It's like a little program running on top of the other program. So this is very different for me because I've always thought of it in terms of, we want to be, to fix ourselves, to fix all our glitches, but then be totally naturalistic and organic. And you're saying that it's useful to have this witness of ourselves. Um,
It's
especially when we're dealing with such diverse communities.
absolutely. I think it's paramount because without us realizing it, our biases take over. Any previous beliefs or experiences that we've had can really take a forefront in how we interact with others, the judgments that we make, the decisions that we make. So, having that self awareness is really, really critical. And during times of, when we're exhausted, we've got lots going on, we're stressed, we're under the pump, perhaps we're feeling overwhelmed, those are the times when it actually is even more important for us to try and be self-aware. And uh, and I think the key way to do this, Howie, is to be present as much as possible. When we're present and we are fully engaged in a conversation, in an interaction, we're really intentional. We're listening, we are thinking about the conversation, we're thinking about how we can add value, we're thinking about how we can connect and relate and what's going to be relevant to the person that we're talking to. And we're also looking for signs. Are they understanding? Am I being clear? All of these cognitive processes that we then divert our attention to helps us really be able to have a bigger impact on those around us. And that's what's really key, to be able to shift into that gear, especially during times of stress and pressure when you're a leader and you've got people looking up to you.
So one of the things I learned about stress, specifically, let's say around anger, is that when you feel anger, count to 10 before speaking or acting. And it seems like really good advice. And I've never remembered to follow it when I'm angry because the part of my brain that's angry doesn't want to count to 10
Yes.
and doesn't know that I ever heard that. So how do you help people, just through when stress happens, we know blood gets shunted to more primitive parts of the brain that don't care what you think and don't understand psychology. How do you help people, cut it off at the pass so that these higher cognitive meta abilities can show up?
Yeah, I love that question. And you're absolutely right. Our first instant reaction will be an emotional reaction. And it's hard to circuit break that at times, especially when the reaction is strong. So, if somebody's really annoyed you, or you're angry about something, and, you have that reaction that you want to tell them there and then how you feel or what's going on. I think the key thing is to find a circuit breaker that does work for you. Now, for some people, it might be that they need to physically just remove themselves from the situation. So, rather than standing there and counting to 10 and still being in the situation, excusing yourself from the situation could be an option. Another option is, in that moment, it's really helpful to change the physiology. And the way to do that is to focus on your breathing. Our body goes into a flight or fight mode when we're aggravated, when we're angry. So a key way to kind of change that physiology is to take a deep breath in through the nose and hold it for 2-3 seconds. Hold that breath and then exhale through the mouth, and making sure that that exhale breath is longer than your inhale breath. If you do that 3 times, Howie, what it does is it activates the parasympathetic system in your body, which gives the signal to your brain and your body that you're in relaxation mode. There's no fight and flight here. So that could be a good way just to bide yourself that little bit of time, just to calm. The other thing I would say is, when when we're feeling angry and we're feeling frustrated, it's so helpful to try to not say anything at that point in time.
Mm.
To say, I just need a minute to be able to respond to this. And that's okay, because you're communicating to the person in front of you that you are wanting some time, you're needing a bit of time to, one, just digest what's going on, but two, respond appropriately and in a measured way. And that's fine.
Mm. It also feels like coming out with a statement like that gives another message about sort of self-awareness or even vulnerability. That to admit to someone that you need a minute is a little bit of an admission. It's a little bit of you're opening yourself up to their judgment.
But does it really matter? does that really matter? Because being vulnerable and taking that opportunity to say, I need a few moments to respond, can also signal to the other person that, there's something not quite right here. It gives them a moment or two to reflect on their behavior and perhaps what's caused that reaction in you, especially if it's different to how you would normally respond. So it could really actually work two ways. It could benefit you because it gives you that breathing space to calm and to recalibrate and think of your response back. But it also gives a sign and signal to the other person that this is not quite right. There's something here that's not quite right or acceptable. But I'm not going to let it go. I'm just going to have a few moments to collate my thoughts.
Yeah, it's almost like it's an invitation to match, right? So
Yes.
that if you see someone else being introspective and a little bit vulnerable, you may, even
Yeah.
unintentionally or unconsciously do the same thing, which seemed like pretty smart, communication bids.
Yeah. And it might even be in that scenario where it gives that person, because they've had that invitation to just think in that moment and realize, oh, actually something I just did there didn't land quite well. And it gives them an opportunity to come back and say something else, or approach the situation differently.
So you mentioned earlier that we all have, dark sides and bright sides. And I'm wondering if the way that you go about teaching and training and coaching that in organizations has the added benefit of destigmatizing behaviors.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's. I think it's important to recognise that the behaviours are behaviours are behaviours. They're observable. They have an impact. They signal to others what our intention is. But at the same time, behaviors can be changed. They can be they can be tweaked and adapted. And quite often, a lot of leaders and managers that I work with, it's only slight adjustments to some of those behaviors that once they're aware of the impact of those during times of high pressure and stress, it's only few tweaks that they need to be that they choose to make, but those few tweaks actually have a significant positive impact on how the other person feels and the relationship, the state of that relationship. So I think it's really important to, when we talk about behaviors, it's not to say any behavior is, really, really bad or really good. I think it's really about understanding, well, what impact does that behavior have? And is it the impact that we intended? Is that the impact that we really want it to have?
Hmm.
And I
That's
think
that seems. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say, if we're clear on the intention and we're clear on the execution, then we are going to more likely demonstrate those behaviors that are going to get the results that we want.
As I said, that sounds like a very business person friendly way of talking about impact, outcome, intentions, execution, so that even someone who's like, this emotional stuff isn't, that important, or I don't have time for it. When you present them with, here's the impact, right? We needed
Yeah.
4 more meetings to deal with what you did, and let's multiply everyone's salary, hourly salary, by the amount of how much wasted work we had. I think you might be able to get through to some pretty, hard-nosed folks.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because recently I've been working with quite a senior leader, and he's gone through one of my programs that looks at the dark side and the bright side of your personality. It's quite an in-depth assessment process. And he went through the process, and it was really interesting because he's now become so aware of two key things that he does. And we've created a little documentary that we'll be sharing publicly soon as well, so he won't mind me sharing this. But when he was in front of audiences, he would talk a lot about himself, and he was wanting to win new business, but he was talking a lot about himself that it actually turned people off, and people switched off. Now, he was so used to talking about his credentials and his wins and the things that he'd been able to help his clients with as his way of proving himself to new clients, that he really didn't need to do that anymore because of his status, his credibility, his track record. And when we went through the whole assessment process, he realized that actually what he really needed to do was lead with more listening and more connection and more empathy. And the moment, Howie, that he started to do that, he started to win over so many more people. And it was really interesting because I'd been working with him for quite a while, and I'd seen that people who knew him really well, this guy is so lovely, Howie. He is a philanthropist. He wants to help everybody. He's very smart, an amazing mind. But it's when you get to know him, you see all of those characteristics, and you see the empathy and you see the caringness that he has for people. But when you hear him speak, you don't hear any of that. You don't feel any of that because it's all about him. So going through the process, he realized that he needed to make that change. And since he's made the change to be more relatable, to be more about the audience and make it very relevant to them, he's noticed that people that don't know him are actually warming to him a lot sooner than they would have before.
So how much of this behavior change is like positive steps versus just inhibition of the things that you shouldn't be doing?
Look, I think it's got to be focused on what impact you want to have. And let's have a look at where your leadership style is currently and how it's aiding or hindering the impact that you want to have. And then let's have a look at the strengths, the superpowers that you have as a leader. And let's have a look at how we magnify those. But at the same time, let's manage the dark side as well. Because no matter how much you magnify the strengths, if occasionally that dark side pops up, all that hard work that we do as leaders to build trust, to really build that relationship with others, if during moments of stress and pressure that work is undone, it can really hinder those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the assessment process, is that a tool that you use or something you've created?
Yeah, so we use a series of psychometrics that are highly validated, reliable tools, and we have a suite of those psychometrics that we use as part of the assessment. So it's quite an extensive assessment. We call it the leader mirror because it's essentially like how we're having a mirror held up to you as a leader, where you are really getting to know the bright side, the dark side, your strengths, your values, your bottlenecks. And so we pull all of that together, and the data, it's all driven by data and 360 feedback from the team as well.
Oh, good. Because I mean, me personally, I'm really struggling with that because I see the value of assessments in working with clients, and I see the dark sides more, and I'm so reluctant to use them because people get pigeonholed, they start getting, their Myers-Briggs profile on their mugs, and they think that it's, or they've made it all up, and so it's all based on the quality of their self-awareness. So I love hearing that there's 360 involved,
Oh,
that
yes.
you can that you're actually measuring actual impact and not your perception of your impact.
Absolutely, because if we look at the research, 80% of people think they are deeply self-aware, when actually the research shows the complete opposite.
I think I remember a study of like social psychologists. It was a survey, and I think like 96% of them felt that they were more self-aware than their peers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's due, Howie, to two key biases. One bias is that we tend to have this fallacy that we are better at things and doing things than we actually are. We have this confirmation bias. And then we also have a bias of an affinity bias. So we naturally gravitate to people who are similar to ourselves.
Infinity bias? Oh,
Yeah,
affinity. It's an
affinity.
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 Okay. I was
My
trying to put those together.
my accent. So yeah, the affinity bias. So very often when we talk with leaders and I work with the senior leadership teams, they'll say to me, they'll say, Simi, we're self-aware, and we're inclusive leaders. And when we look at the research really shows that, well, actually, we're not deeply self-aware. We think we're more self-aware than we actually are. And many of us have this bias that we think that we're inclusive when we're not inclusive of people that are different to us. We have this affinity to gravitate to people who are like us, that have similar personalities, similar backgrounds, similar interests. And if we're wanting to create more inclusive cultures and really take advantage of the diversity around us, the diversity of minds and experiences, then as leaders, we've got to really work on being more inclusive. And that's where I come back to that whole point of, being self aware.
So what does it look like to a person who's not being included? When the leader says, I'm inclusive, but the person is like, laughing in their collar, like you're so full of it. What is that? What is the experience? Because I'm imagining it's not downright, name calling or racial or sexual profiling, right there. It's more subtle, but it's picked up. What does that
Yeah.
look and feel like to be on the receiving end of someone who's not inclusive?
Yeah, and you're right. Very often these behaviors are not overt. Um, but I refer to them as micro discourtesies, and this comes from the psychology research of citizenship behavior. And when you're on the receiving end of these micro discourtesies, you know that they've happened, you feel it, and they're so subtle that other people around you might not even notice. So, an example could be, in a meeting, the same person mispronounces your name. It could be that, your leader or manager, when they talk to you, they don't make eye contact with you, but they do with others.
Hmm.
Eye contact's a really interesting one, because eye contact signals a sense of trust and importance when we give each other, eye contact. With our names are hugely important. Often they're the first thing that somebody gets to know about us, even before they've met us. And if we're not taking the time to really get to know people's names and be able to learn to pronounce their names, each time that the person's name is mispronounced, or that they're ignored, for example, each time that happens, it signals that that person does not matter. And quite often, Howie, it's not intentional. As we know, leaders and managers are so busy, there's so much going on. And often it's not intentional. But again, these biases do kick in. And when these behaviors, these micro discourtesies happen over several occurrences, the person on the receiving end is impacted. And there's lots of research that shows that it impacts you psychologically. It can impact mood, stress, and depression levels. It can increase levels of cortisol, so your stress levels. It can lead people to physical health conditions, eating disorders, obesity as well. There's a lot of research that shows the impact that micro discourtesies have on people on the receiving end.
Hmm. And I'm just thinking about if someone came to me and told me that I was being micro discourteous, like part of me, and I'm a middle-aged white guy, part of me would be pissed because like I would be like defensive, right? Because there was this huge, I mean, it could go either way, but this huge sort of shame bubble. Like, oh, I'm being racist, I'm being sexist, I'm being homophobic, I'm being whatever the category the person thinks, right? So how do you, as an outsider coming in to help, get those messages across in ways that don't cause middle-aged white men's head to explode?
Look, I think it's really about working together and recognizing that regardless of age, background, color, any of the differences, we all have unique differences. We are all unique individuals. Regardless of any of those differences, ultimately, what every human being wants and needs is to feel like they matter, like they are of significance. So, my key here in the scenario that you just presented would be one, it's actually, I think it's great to hear that the person would have felt comfortable to come and have that conversation in the first place, to even raise it, because many people don't. They
Mm,
hold it in, and what happens is they check out. They mentally check out. That's when we see that's when we see engagement levels drop, productivity levels drop, levels of absenteeism, turnover, all of that happens. But the real positive here is that someone has had the courage to come and speak to their manager. And I would say, as a manager, it's not to, to try not to be defensive, because when we're defensive, what we do is we shut down a conversation.
mm,
What we really want to do is we want to just create a space for that person to express how they felt. Because quite often, all they need is to express how they feel. And within that expression, there can be an element of understanding where, as a manager, you could then start to see it from their perspective. So,
mm,
a great way to do that is, to give feedback is to use a framework called the AID framework. So the AID, the A would be, to say what the actions were. So if we were just role playing this, and I was coming to you, I'd say, Howie, um, I'd love to just share something with you. When we were in that meeting, I really felt that you were not very receptive to my ideas. You dismissed them. And I felt that some of those ideas that I was presenting were shut down before they got any airtime. The I would be impact. The impact of that is, Howie, I actually feel that you you're not valuing my expertise and the different views and ideas that I have that I think could make a difference here in the business. The D stands for desired actions. So then I would say something like, Howie, in the future, I'd really appreciate just to have that airtime, whether it's in the meeting or with you after, to make sure um, I can share those ideas, because I really feel I've got some good ideas to bring to the table. How can we make that happen?
Hmm. Gotcha. So I'm hearing a lot of I statements.
Yes.
And I guess what I heard earlier, the reframe is to take it as a compliment when someone comes to you with an aid framework.
Yeah, because it takes courage to come and talk to your leader or manager, because very often, Howie, you know, people are not doing those behaviors. Those micro discourtesies are very subtle. We all do them. I've been working in the space of inclusion and diversity for a long time now, and I can promise you that, I will regularly unintentionally display or do those micro discourtesies as well. We're human, we will do them, but the more that we can be aware of them and we can call in, I don't like to say use the term call out behaviors, because this is not about um you know shaming, naming and shaming. No, this is about, let's create understanding. Let's actually really get to know each other. And if I tell you, Howie, how, what you did and how it made me feel, one, you're aware of it. Two, it gives you and I an opportunity to have a deeper understanding of each other. And three, there's an opportunity to do things differently.
I have a totally different question right now, which is
Go
so
for it.
based on, you're a professional communicator, understand psychology, and I'm not. And I noticed that you have used my name probably 30 times in the conversation, and I never do that, Simi. I it feels weird to put that into my speech patterns, Simi. And I'm curious, like, is that something you trained yourself to do? You do it naturally? It's got a purpose? What am I losing by not doing it? I mean, I'm sure if I go through my archives, I can go through hundreds of episodes where after I introduce the person, I never say their name.
Ah, well, let me ask you a question, Howie. How did it feel to you being, hearing your name when you and I are talking?
Weirdly,
How did it feel?
I'll tell you, yeah, I'll tell you. Weirdly, it reminded me of when our dog was lying on the sofa or on the floor, and we said her name, and she'd be like, "Whoa!" Right? Like there's something a little bit sparkly about my name. Like it's almost like part of me is going, wah 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 wah, Howie, huh?
Well, it's a great way to check in. Is somebody, is, is what you're sharing, is it landing? Is it relevant? I'm speaking, to you. We're having this wonderful conversation, and I want to make sure, first and foremost, that the conversation's landing with you, and then hopefully for your audience as well.
Hmm. So how, you heard me say your name twice in a very exaggerated fashion. Obviously, it was a little exaggerated, but it feels really awkward, Simi, to just throw your name in, and it feels like a really high extra cognitive load. What advice do you have for me?
I think you've got to do, we've got to try and be natural as much as possible. And I know I'm talking about being self aware and, being intentional. But at the same time, we've also got to be authentic. We've got to be real with who we are. So if that's a really big deviation to what you normally do, don't do it. Or do it in a way that is not as overt. Maybe drop in the name once or twice and subtly. Um, I think of it in the sense of, think of a light switch, a dimmer switch, right?
Uh-huh.
If you're turning that dimmer switch all the way to one side, like, a 180, you're literally changing the the dynamics, the brightness, or the darkness of the room. And what I'm saying is, we don't need to do that. We just need to, as leaders, we're not looking to flip and change our style so drastically that people don't know where they are with you when they're having a conversation or they're interacting with you. They need to know who you are, and they need to have that reliability and that consistency. So I would say, going back to that light dimmer switch, it's about flexing your style just ever so slightly to the right and ever so slightly to the left, depending who you've got in front of you.
Uh-huh. Well, so I mean, partly it reminds me of my attempts every so often to stop saying filler sounds like and which I've never worked on hard enough to not do it. There was one. Like, so like, but I know that I could slow down and, it's like, unnatural for me to play a piece on the guitar that I can't play, but I could practice. And at a
Yeah,
certain point, it would become natural. But it feels a little bit different from that in that it's a specific psychological tool or lever, and it sounds cynical from coming from my mouth when I hear that. But just to think about what what I'm trying, what's the outcome, what's my intention to occasionally use a guest's name or a conversation partner's name, Simi, the way it would come out naturally and have a positive effect, as opposed to, here's my checklist. I have to say the guest's name 5 times. Oh, that was 3. And then I'm done.
so interestingly, when you and I are having this conversation, and I probably do this more so than I'm aware of, actually. Saying the person's name um, in a conversation, I think a big part of it comes from really wanting to make that other person feel seen, heard, recognized, valued.
Hmm.
And these are key behaviors of being an inclusive leader. And quite often, and I go back to that whole analogy that our names are, really important. They're an important part of our identity.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting for me to look at myself, and also to think, some feedback about, what you said, like, we matter, that we're important, that we're seen and valued. I'm going to put you on the spot. Is this conversation doing that, even if I'm not saying your name?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, Howie. I feel that, you and I have had several conversations offline. We've got to know each other a little bit. That connection is already there. So I don't feel that in our interaction, it makes a difference whether you say my name or not. Perhaps when you're meeting someone new and really looking to establish that relationship and that connection with them, you may wish to drop their name in a couple of times. Have a play with it, Howie, and see what works for you. See
Mm-hmm.
what feels comfortable, and the impact that it has as well. Like I said, it needs to be authentic to you.
Yeah, yeah. But everything that I do that's authentic was once inauthentic, right? So I don't want to get hung up on that.
Yeah, I would say
Right.
try it, play with it. It's something
Yeah.
to experiment
Cool.
and see what the impact is.
Excellent. So I don't want to let go of you before we talk about your book.
Yes,
All right.
I'm very
So
excited. I've got a book coming out shortly in September, and it's a project I've been working on for the last 4 years. The book is called Productivity Joy, and it's all about helping busy people be effective and feel energized in 5 minutes a day.
Yeah, right.
And do you know, that's exactly what I thought when I was developing this formula. So I'll tell you a funny story actually, Howard, because 4 years ago, I was, you know, I can laugh about it now, but actually I was feeling really stressed and overwhelmed and, working crazy hours, juggling little kids, my family. We'd migrated back and forth from London to Melbourne, back to London, and then back to Melbourne. So there's a lot going on. And I remember really specifically one Friday evening after a long week of work, coming in, opening my front door, making my way down the corridor, and I could hear this laughter coming from the lounge. And I walk in, and my husband and my children looked up at me and they said, "Oh, here comes the bull." Now, they said it in jest. They were joking, but oh my goodness, was that like an ouch for me? It really was. I'd never been called a bull before, and it really took me by surprise. And I had to think about that for a few moments. And I think what really pained me about that was I actually realized that during that period of my life, I was not a joy to be around. I was stressed, I was burnt out, I was feeling overwhelmed. And it was a wake up call for me that my loved ones were really not getting the best out of me. When I then started to do research and also working with my clients, it's a shocking statistic that's out there, but the research shows that 81% of professionals feel stressed, overwhelmed, and burnt out. And when we feel like that, how can we be productive? We're not productive. We're not our best selves. We're not able to do our best work. The research shows that it costs organizations $1.8 billion annually because of this lack of productivity. But even more than that, it actually robs us all of our joy. So I, came to this point that, hold on a moment, I'm the psychologist that's not taking my own medicine. I'm not taking care of my own well-being. I'm not using what I know about the human mind to prime and activate my mindset in the morning in a way that would allow me to be really effective, to show up in the way that I really want, to help me think clearly, and to help me have the impact that I want. And then I started to do a lot of research to see what was out there. I started to talk to a lot of my clients, finding out what they did in the mornings to set their day up for success. And to my surprise, actually, I realized that there wasn't a reliable method or tool or a formula out there that helped busy people like you and I prime and activate our brains, our mindset at the start of the day that would help us to think clearly, take care of our emotions, have better mood, be able to prioritize what we need to do, and be very intentional about the impact or how we wanted to show up each day. So that's when I set out to do my research, and I started to develop the formula. It's called the 5Qs formula, and I started to develop it over COVID. I was working with a lot of leaders globally, with leaders and their leadership teams, to help them manage their well-being and really help during that time when there was so much pressure, ambiguity, and lots of challenges that leaders were experiencing with their teams. So during that time, I was able to trial and test my formula. And what I started to develop and see a pattern in, there's 5 key questions that if we ask ourselves in the morning, these 5 key questions, each of those plays a purpose and a role in activating and priming your brain. So the formula, the 5 Qs formula, is essentially that. It's 5 key critical questions that you ask yourself at the start of the day, each and every day. It only takes 5 minutes. And that was through a lot of trial and practice with my clients that we got to a point where they said, Simi, I know the formula now, and it takes me 5 minutes in the morning to do it.
All right. So, do we have
Shared a
to,
lot with you there.
do we have to wait to buy the book in September? Is your publisher like, putting a moratorium on sharing what the 5 questions are, or any of them, or can we talk about them now?
Look, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to really help as many people, and my target and my goal is ambitious. But I believe you're going to have a mission, let's have a real strong mission here. So my mission is to help 5 million busy professionals globally be more effective and feel energized in 5 minutes a day. So the formula, well, the book Productivity Joy shares the formula. It also shares stories of my own and those of my clients that have used the formula, how they use it, the impact that it's had for them. The book also shares the psychological science and the research behind the formula and each of the questions. And in the book, we share an acronym called Prime, and I can share that with you because I think that's a really great way to remember each of the questions or what the questions lean into. So you can get the specific questions from the book, but the actual questions, one, get you to pinpoint how you're feeling at the start of the day. So that's the P in Prime. The R is to recognize gratitude and inspired gratitude. The I is to identify the things in your environment that are working well. The M is to make a list of 3 things of high impact that you're going to do that day. And the E is to envision how you want to show up for the day. So at a very high level, that's what the 5 Qs formula is about. And I really want to share the formula with as many people sooner rather than later. The book will officially be in the bookstores internationally September the 25th. But in July, we are going live with the pre-orders. I would love to offer your audience go and pre-order a copy of Productivity Joy so they can trial and test the formula themselves. And they just need to drop a quick email with a receipt of their purchase, and we will send them the 5 questions, the 5 Qs formula in advance of them getting the book. So yeah, for me, it's really about getting the formula out there so that as many people can benefit from it as possible. Many of my clients, so 100 of my clients, have trialed and tested the formula, and they've said, the feedback has been that it's a game changer. It makes them feel so much more intentional. It helps them be impactful, and it really helps them be effective. And at the end of the day, they feel accomplished and they feel fulfilled.
So I had conversations yesterday with a couple of startup founders in their mid-20s, and they're amazing people, and they're working 18, 19 hours a day a lot of the time, solving problems, trying to keep things going. And they have, of necessity, they have very self-disciplined self-care regimens, diet, sleep, exercise, which is great. I think it's absolutely necessary. And I don't, they don't feel, it doesn't feel to me that they are joyful. And I'm curious what you think, like, is it possible to actually be joyful when you are, they don't have social lives. They have given up on what most people in their 20s are doing for fun. They haven't taken vacations in years. Is it possible to be that oriented towards work as a startup founder and still be joyful? Or would you say that no, they've made a choice to sacrifice that now?
I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it's an either or at all. And I think that you can have both. You really can have both. And it was interesting when I was doing my research around, what is currently out there. And I asked a lot of senior leaders, very successful, high performing professionals, you know, business owners, very ambitious business owners, what they did as part of their morning routine. And I was hearing lots of different responses like exercise, their morning coffee, walk, meditation, yoga, reading their emails so they can be prepared for the day. I was hearing all of this stuff, but I wasn't hearing anything that was to do with actually our mindset and being able to be really intentional about priming your day. And the the founders of accelerating organizations and startups, they need to have cognitive clarity, and they need to also have creativity. And that creativity and cognitive clarity comes from being able to prime your mindset.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out how much of a um, panacea this is, right? I guess that's kind of what I'm asking. Like, can this 5 minutes bring the joy to those folks who are working so hard and saying no to so much of life, or I mean, I guess you're saying, certainly try it, right? It's not going to hurt.
I think absolutely try it. But when you read the book Productivity Joy, I also talk about values and becoming really clear on what your values are and prioritizing 3 key tasks in a day that are in line with what your goals and ambitions are. So, at work, in your business, or in your personal life. So the book really steps you through how to do that. I think whenever we do anything without purpose and without intentionality, we risk not being able to experience the true joy.
Mhm. So
When
what is joy?
joy is a feeling of feeling fulfilled, feeling feeling an internal spark inside of you that you feel fulfilled, you feel satisfied, you feel that you've done the best that you can do. That's joy. Joy is also being able to help others around you feel seen, heard, recognized, and valued. That's joy. Because when you do that for others, you give them that time and the attention because you've really been able to take care of your thoughts and your emotions. You've primed yourself at the start of the day. You're more likely to be able to have really present interactions. So it impacts the quality of those relationships around you as well.
Hmm. Cool. So how can people follow you, learn more from you, find out more about the book and work with you? You said you work with people all around the world, right? So,
Yeah, I work with very ambitious business owners that are looking and leaders that are looking to really elevate their impact. So they're really looking to make that difference in the world.
Mhm.
by being the best versions of themselves. I'm on all socials, so LinkedIn, Instagram,
Okay, well,
Simi, Simi Rayat Rayat.com.
terrific. All right, it's new, right?
It's new. It's been, we're going through rebranding. We've got a new domain, so it's all happening. But yeah, I'm on all socials, and I'd love to hear from anyone in your audience that is interested in trying the 5Qs formula, how they find it, and also the benefits or insights that they receive from reading the book Productivity Joy, and to help me with my mission to help 5 million busy professionals shift from being reactive to responsive, from feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, to calm and composed, and to really be energized and effective.
It's a beautiful mission because it's such a powerful way to scale, right? Because each of those 5 million is going to affect hundreds more. We could, it doesn't take too much to reach the whole planet.
Absolutely. And we can all play a part in that. So that's my mission, and that's how I would love for anybody that gets the value from Productivity Joy to be able to share the ripple effect.
Beautiful, love it. Simi Rayat, thank you so much. See, I'm good at doing it at the end. Sim- Simi Rayat, thank you so much for taking the time today and for the work you do and for bringing joy into the world and helping people find it and share it.
Thank you, Howie, so much. It's been wonderful to speak with you, and I'm looking forward to our further conversations.
Right on. Take care.
Thank you.